Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super Fantify. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm gonna talk about the season 1 finale, maybe series finale of Mecha-Ude Mechanical Arms. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode. So let's break it down. I'm going to talk about in the beginning, like, it's unclear whether this is like a season finale. It seems like this might be a series finale, but like I said, I'm just bringing it up early on. The title of this could change if developments happen in the future that give a clear, concise element on whether or not this is like a finale or just a season finale. But either way, talk about that more at the end. Obviously, I like the backstory we get with Tsukihiro. Obviously, we learn a little bit more about his situation. Obviously, the parallels you can draw between Jun and his brother, as I've talked about in previous episodes. But, like, Fist overheard some family members like talking about Tsukihiro about how he's a failure because he's sick. Because it turns out Yakumo is the one who ended up like expanding like the Kagami plan for what the city is. And Tsukihiro, despite being the oldest son who's supposed to lead the charge, Yakumo seems to be the more appropriate choice. And, you know, Fist is like, does that hurt you knowing like, right, the people like don't like you or trust you? Like, that's gotta suck that your own people don't like look at you as like the person who should take charge. And so for him, it's like he understands, like he's like, I know I'm kind of just an obstacle for Yakumo, who kind of would be the better person. I'm the older son, but like I'm the failure in a lot of regards. Once again, it's kind of the inverse in a lot of ways from Jun and his brother. But for Tsukihiro, he's like, I wouldn't be able to accomplish anything that I've got. Like, Yakumo took in what I had planned and expanded upon it, and I'm always going to be proud of my little brother. Which, you know, Fist talks about his situation with Alma. He's like, I decided that it was probably best for my brother to lead the charge in like saving our people, but now he's like, I'm starting to wonder maybe I should be the one to kind of take back control of that. So it ultimately comes down to Tsukihiro being like, right, we'll both do whatever it takes for our respective little brothers. Like, we'll both play the role of big brothers and do whatever it takes. And we find out Tsukihiro did in fact survive that situation with Aldera all those years ago, but the problem was he sacrificed himself to save his little brother, you know? And it's like, because he's like, we'll both, and he was probably hoping that Fist would carry on. It's like, right, you'll make sure my brother survives, and also you'll make sure that our dreams all across the board survive. And that's a sad thing, considering, like, right, like by that point in time, Yakumo sadly was already dead, you know? But it, like, that's why I was like, I thought that was so interesting. Because they also brought up, like, Tsukihiro couldn't have any kids. That's why I brought up, like, oh, it must be, like, cousins or something that they had that ended up having children. Why? Like, because it's like Yakumo wasn't around to have kids. And I was like, was Tsukihiro? But, like, then it seemed like he did die. But it's like, no, he survived, but he did, in fact, die, you know? So they, like, that's why I was bringing up previously, like, Jun and his brother aren't direct descendants, because those two had no direct descendants, Yakumo and Tsukihiro. Either way, this is what motivated Fist to go down the path that he is. And so that's where we are present day, where, you know, this started with these brothers, Fist and Alma, but now it also, you know, folded over into the Kagamis with Yakumo and Tsukihiro. And like I said, they might not be brothers, but it is friends, you know, friends and brothers, that being, you know, Jun's body being controlled by Fist, but, you know, Hikaru and Alma fighting against him. So there's a lot of, I always butcher this series name, and I think I brought it up at the beginning of this series. Definitely gave me like Kraid vibes. I'm sure, like, if I actually looked it up, it's just like when I was a kid, I was like a kid or whatever when that show came out. So I always said it like that, Kraid. Like, there's probably like a better pronunciation for it. I've just never bothered looking into it. But yeah, it just kind of gave me a lot of those vibes, and it's just like the clashing under that, and obviously things get pretty hectic. They're like got these wings and they're jetting all around, battling it out, because no one else can really back them up, because it's like, well, Fist with Aldera's power is too powerful. The only person that can do anything right now is Hikaru and Alma, plus everyone else is spent when it comes to their Arbitrium, because they all poured into Hikaru. So we have that clash going around, and it's a pretty brutal fight. I mean, them slamming into like rocks and stuff, and just especially that underwater section was pretty brutal, where it's just kind of like slamming, like I said, slamming you into rocks, swirling you around. Because Fist's plan is to like, right, I'm gonna take control of all humans in the world, and then he's like, basically, I'm gonna build a better world. Because for him, it's like humans can't be trusted. They turn against their own. It's like humans are their own in their own destruction, even with family and those you're supposed to have backs. Like you stab them in the back, because he reveals that the reason why the Aldora situation happened that led to Yakumo's death and ultimately Tsukihito's death as well, was planned by other people who wanted to get rid of, I think, both of them. Not just Tsukihito, but Yakumo as well. It's like, right, why keep them around when we can reap the benefits? So Fist heard that, and that's what made him disgusted with humans. It's like, you guys suck. And so for him, he's been on this path of, I'm going to lead down this path to try and course correct this world. I'll save our people while also saving this world from humans. And basically, he's like, I'm coming from a place of reason that humans aren't reasonable. They do stupid stuff, and it's like they need to be course corrected. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna make this world into an ideal world, and I'll save my people on top of it. So for him, it's almost like I'm doing what's right by Tsukihito's people, the humans, but I'm also doing right by my people by gathering all this power. So it's all one and the same. But it's the thing of, he was hurt and in so much pain, and his desires were contorted. And it's something Alma and Hikaru realized, like, right, you're just like Alma. Alma, the moment he remembered the truth of what happened about Yakumo, he tried to run away. He was like too scared of history repeating itself. But it's like, you have not forgiven yourself for what happened to Tsukihito and Yakumo, but specifically Tsukihito, because it's like, right, we're both big brothers. There was a kinship and a friendship there, a bond, and it's just, you love Tsukihito, but you also hate humans because of what happened to Tsukihito. So that contradiction is what led you to this point, because Hikaru and Alma keep stressing the point of, we all know that Tsukihito would never be okay. Like, him and Yakumo would never like co-sign all the stuff that you've done. So, and that like trying not, like his unwillingness to like back down. Because I mean, to be fair, he's been doing this for so long, many generations, planning this all out and leading up to this point, that it's like, I can't back down now. He's just so caught up in his own anger and sadness that he refuses to see anything else. Like, he even admits later on, it's like, I knew that Tsukihito would not like be okay with me want me to do this, but he was just so far gone, and it's understandable. I think that's the interesting contradiction, because he brings up the whole thing about how like contradictory like humans can be, and he's talking about, oh, I'm coming from this place of reason. It's like, no, you're being driven by emotion, and you're trying to disguise it as like, oh, I'm coming from a logical standpoint. It's like, no, you're not. You're coming from emotion. It's driving your, once again, sadness and anger have like consumed you. And you needed a target for it. And it's like, yes, humans can be foolish, but it is also a thing of, they can always, take that step forward. And, not every human is bad. Not every human is good. It's like that humans are capable of jealousy and sadness and anger. And it's just like, that's all kind of part of the human experience. So I'd also like, speaking of the fight too, there was this dope moment where it's like, Hikaru was like flung in the air, and him and Alma were separated, and him like kind of like flying forward and like slamming his like arm back into like Alma. I was like, oh, I love that. Sadly, Alma doesn't have any like projectile attacks, so it kind of gives Fist, the advantage when he's able to just like fire out energy blasts and But I once again, that I think it's so dope that it's like they are able to separate and not stay connected, but still like Hikaru did it again, where like he enlarges Alma and then like sends him forward like a flying fist, but then like Hikaru comes behind Alma like a few like seconds later and then reinserts his hand, kind of feeding even more, adding more impact to the punch. Stuff like that I thought was pretty dope, and how once again just them flying around, clashing into each other. But at the same time, this is all happening. Jun isn't like taking this lying down. He's still trying to fight back and give Hikaru a chance. And it kind of comes down, the last bit kind of reminds me of like basically a slugfest at the very end. That's where I was kind of also bringing up the S-Cry. Like, if you've ever seen the end of that anime, it's an ambiguous ending because you don't know who comes out on top. But basically the final, spoilers, Persona 5 Royal specifically ends pretty much that same way, where it's just like, yeah, it comes down to a slugfest. But yeah, it's just that typical villain thing of just like, right, when you're just not, once again, not willing to back down after everything, your unwillingness to see past everything that you're going through. And Hikaru is like, I want to save Alma. Like, I mean, no, I'm sorry. I'm keep doing that. Sorry. I want to save Fists. Like, you know, and obviously Alma appreciates that. So it comes down to one charged hit on both sides, and both sides start cracking. And I was almost thinking, once again, another anime reference, it felt like it was going to be like how, without everything, but you know, if you know how Naruto ends, I was wondering if it was going to kind of be that, and it kind of didn't end up being that. It ended up being a one-sided situation, because we see that Alma starts cracking, and so does Fist, but Fist ends up taking the most of the brunt, and like the entire like exterior to him like breaks, and he goes back to his cubed form. But luckily we see Alma end up grabbing him up out of the water, and we kind of skip to some time later in the aftermath of everything. So I was curious to see where this was going, because up until this point in the series, there were only two main groups, the Kagami group and ARMS. But now we find out, like, oh, there's another group. What was it, the Hectero group? I can't remember, but essentially it comes down to, it seems like this group was maybe already active even with everything going on. They were just hiding in the shadow while the big guys of Kagami and ARMS were duking it out. But now that like things have, in the aftermath of everything, they felt emboldened, like, yo, we're coming out of the shadows. So it turns out they've taken pieces of Aldera from the aftermath of that, and they've kind of constructed new shackles. And so now ARMS and the Kagami group are working together, heading in new directions. I mean, we don't hear as much on the ARMS front, like as we've seen the developments a little bit this episode with like where Kagami is, but ARMS, when it comes to leadership, I don't know if Quinn is now, because like he's the main one, we're hearing him talk about what he's up to. So I don't know if he's kind of taking on the more leadership role that what was the fake leader? What's the leader's fake name? Yakumo's fake name? What was it? Aojin or something like that? Like filling that void. Like we don't know who's filling that void, or maybe it's kind of more of like a. I mean, because obviously Kagami kind of has like one leadership, but it has like a brain trust, whereas ARMS kind of, maybe it's kind of just a brain trust going forward. Maybe there is no solo leader. I don't know. They didn't really get into that, but it's just about trying to stop this new group. And we catch up with Owner, and he's just kind of like, right, how could you do this? Evil. And he starts getting into it, stomping on the guy. He's like, to me, you're weak. And his Mecha-Ude had to be like, yo, what are you doing? You're supposed to be fighting evil for justice. Are you still here like falling into old habits? And we catch up with, like, you know, like I said, a lot of the Kagami group and some members of the ARMS group in this whole battle. Like Home Dude, who has like this skating Mecha-Ude, he's like, yo, if we send him back to the Mecha-Ude world, maybe he can be saved. And it's like, yeah, he can be. And Quinn is like, yeah, with my research and stuff like that, there's going to be a repair system or whatever in that world. And he's talking about missing Aki, because he's like, oh, Aki's going to miss it, because I don't know if he goes there from time to time or something like that. That was my thinking. Because the way this was initially set up, I'm going to let you know my thought process. I thought like, okay, like maybe Alma and Hikaru are going to go into that world together. And I thought that'd be like potentially set up for a season 2. Was just going to be like, no, it's going to take place predominantly in the Mecha-Ude world type of situation. But then I was like, maybe people come and go from time to time or something like that. Like Quinn, for example, like, would he be going there to help? And it seemed like that's what he was kind of implying. And then he was like, oh, Aki's going to miss me leaving. And so it's like, you know, he probably goes there to set stuff up and was going to come back. It was never going to be like a permanent situation. Just make sure everything's up and running to kind of help the process of healing the Mecha-Udes and their world. But then we catch up with the Kagami situation, and June talks about like, yes, Amaryllis and Fist were behind a lot of the stuff that Kagami did, but we still have to hold ourselves responsible. So going forward, we're going to like make amends for how we handled the Mecha-Ude situation by like dealing with this upcoming group that's coming out of the shadows. We're going to stomp them into the ground and set free a lot of Mecha-Udes. And I love that he's talking to his brother. He's like, now because I'm in this new position that I'm in, I'm asking for the president's dismissal. And he's like, that's going to make it a lot more easier to communicate. And then then June's brother and his secretary just kind of like, ugh. I don't know if he's kind of saying like, right, because we're both leaders right now, it just makes it hard for both of our departments to kind of communicate. So he's like, right, if you're no longer the president, doesn't have to worry about like our communication. I can just like get you to, it makes us easier to kind of be on equal footing, and I don't have to worry about like running up the chain of command just to be able to talk to you because you are the president versus like I'm running this very specific section of the Kagami group. So, and just him laughing about it and stuff like that. We also catch up with Aki and Fubuki. It turns out they're tracking down. It doesn't seem like it is Amaryllis. It does seem like she's gone, but they say like a worm type. So I don't know if there are fragments of Amaryllis still out there, still doing her thing, or are there kind of people or Mecha-Udes cut from the same cloth? Because we see it kind of in the little flash forward like end credit sequence as well. So that's one like I don't know if that's once again Amaryllis itself, because she doesn't call her by that. She said like, oh, the worm type Mecha-Ude. So that's been causing more and more trouble. So, and I love the whole thing where like both Sinus and Dex are doing the whole thing of like, oh no, this is the way you're supposed to go. It's like, no, this is your way to go. So you're like, oh, so maybe it was never Aki that had the terrible sense of direction. Maybe it was the Mecha-Udes the entire time. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe, Fubuki shares in that terrible sense of direction as well. So. And then finally we had, Hikaru, who was looking all over the place for Aki, but it's like, oh, she was already here. It's like, well, luckily her sister was there to kind of rein her in and keep her on schedule and, in the right spot. But yeah, they end up sending Alma off. And it's a really, I was tearing up a bit with Alma and Hikaru saying their goodbyes. And it's like, oh, like, when's this next volume of this manga coming out? It's like, is this goodbye? But he's like, no, like, this isn't like goodbye. It's like, we'll kind of see each other again. And it's like, goodbye for now, partner, and send him off. And he's like, oh, do I get to keep his hoodie? And he's like, yeah. It's kind of like a nice, I think for him, it's a sentimental like reminder of like, right, I've always got Hikaru by my side. And also like it ended up hanging on him as like a necklace, and at the base of that is I think it's fist core, so like he can try and bring his brother back, and activate him again. And it's like, right, my brother's by my side. Like, I don't think he's permanently damaged, but he's probably in the same thing as Skater Dudes. Make it was like, right, he's damaged and needs to be repaired so he can be brought back. So, and that's why I was kind of so interested. I'm like, all right, this seems like a setup for a season 2. Like, maybe there's stuff in the Mecha world, but this could also be the ending. And we get that flash forward with, like, the end credits, which I also love the rendition of the song. Like, it's a slightly different version. I don't know if it's, like, the full version, but it does seem like a slightly different rendition of the ending theme song. Which, like I said, I love that theme song so much. It's just beautiful, and there's just a sadness to it. It kind of reminds me of just like all the Kingdom Hearts games, like how like you get different versions of like, like using Simple and Clean, for example, or Sanctuary, like you get like the like more poppy like version like at the beginning, and then you get like a slowed down, kind of almost stripped away version at the end of the games. It's kind of like that. But yeah, we're keeping tabs on like everyone from Kagami and ARMS, and seeing like we see that Fubuki's going to the same school as Aki and Hikaru, and I love that Hikaru and Aki have a moment, and you just see Hikaru's friend, she's in the background looking like, ooh, look at the sparks flying between them. It's like they're sharing like food or something like that, and it's just like, yeah, she's still watching this romantic comedy unfold. We had that one dude who's a pretty higher up in the Kagami group. He goes with Owner into the Mecha-Ude world, but then they get captured. And I was like, oh, so what's that about? But then we see later on it's June and Aki and Hikaru. Like, because Hikaru gets visited by Alma, who busts in there on him. And I don't know if they're there specifically to rescue them, but it did seem like they were captured by some, like, I guess maybe there's an uprising group in the Mecha-Ude world, or maybe there's other dangers, that we're just not aware of. But whatever the case may be, our trio is there at the very end. The last shot is like them battling whatever coming their way. So, because we also saw like Aki and Fubuki were at one point like dealing with those like other worm types, and like Fubuki kind of got captured. So they're showing you a lot of stuff where it's like there's a lot of adventures here that we could fill in those gaps if we do get a season 2. but it's unclear, especially with like the ending being what it is, where it just ends with like Hikaru on the train opening his eyes and this lady has a baby. I think it'd be beautiful if it ended up being the same lady who was because she was pregnant at the time, but either way Hikaru's kind of like, oh no, you can take my seat, just showing you how far he's going from the beginning of this series to the last shot of this series or season. So once again, we could always fill in that gap to be like, oh no, we could always go back and do that story. I mean, it's a great, beautiful ending and kind of gives you, like I said, some future reference of like, oh, there's still more stories that can be told in his universe. It's just a matter of if the creator feels comfortable or wants to, because let's not forget, this isn't originally in an anime. So like, this isn't based on a manga. I think there has been a manga adaptation, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly, which I just looked it up. It is still ongoing, said manga. So I am curious, like how different it is from the anime. I mean, especially considering like the anime was, I think it's probably its own thing. Maybe the manga went a different route. I don't know. I don't know how that really works in this regard. Because once again, this started as like a crowd-funded Kickstarter like anime, and they did like a pilot episode, and then eventually got a full series, which is this series. So it's that interesting thing where I could see it like that manga might go a different route and kind of continue the story. Maybe it goes past where the anime is, or maybe it's a thing of that's why I'm so curious to see, like, is the manga like in pace with like the anime, or did they like heavily diverge? Is this almost like a Full Metal Alchemist versus Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood type of situation? Like, I'm curious if that's kind of how this would be approached, or not, or is it like I said, is like that manga severely its own thing? Where I don't know. Even though, because like the manga does predate the anime, so because like the manga came out like 2022 and it's still, like I said, to this day still going potentially. So like I said, I just don't know that compare and contrast. But once again, I personally would love more. I'd love more of these characters, more in this world. And like I said, there's plenty of setup for there to be more stories told, but it's also set up in a way where it's like, this might be a one and done. So I don't know what I'm going to do with the title of this video. Like I said, it's one of those series where I'd love more in this universe, because I'd love to spend more time with these characters because I really like them, and I'd love to see where things go in the future. But I'd also be perfectly okay with this just being the end. So we'll just see where things kind of go for now. I'll probably, like I said, just I'll probably fiddle with the title going forward. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, to everyone involved in this series, from the original creator to all the voices to all the animators, thank you for great series, and hopefully we get more. But even if we don't, and this is all we get, thank you for making this great series. It's been a lot of fun and had a lot of depth and heart to it. So, but yeah, that's really all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.